The alternative to this approach is basically if you take the really orthodox Misesian approach and you basically say, okay, the Fed, let's say, the really orthodox Misesian thing to do would be to say the Fed can no longer create dollars. Like, we're going to freeze the money supply. Unfortunately, what happens if you freeze the money supply is it's sort of like saying, the last time this worked, and it genuinely worked, was in the crash of 1922. In the crash of 1922, financial inflation, prices dropped a lot. There was a huge deflationary shock, and the country was sort of physically healthy enough to absorb that shock. And so it was very painful, but it sort of could be recovered from. It's hard to know what would have happened if sort of full liquidation in Andrew Mellon style had been the policy in the Great Depression. That was not tried. Instead, the policy of financial inflation was tried. The last time there was a serious deflationary policy was, of course, Volckerism in and around 1980, in which sort of the merits of a somewhat Misesian policy were restored. And instead of interest rates going up to like almost 5% where they are now, Volcker took them up to 20%.
Yeah.
That was insane, right? And the thing is that what you've got is sort of the way I think about this process of decline is you've kind of got an underlying sort of health of the economy such that, 20% interest rates or like 25% price drops like you saw in 1922 are like, running a marathon up a mountain, right? It's good for you to run marathons. It you basically, as Mellon said, he's like liquidate everything and all the like corrupt stuff will come tumbling down. The problem is with running marathons, it's good for you, but at a certain level, it's like if you tell your like 50-year-old dad, or your 80-year-old dad in Michael's case to run, a marathon,
Wait. Of the three people here, who is the most who acts like a grandpa? Everything you do is just sitting people down and telling these rambling, meandering stories about how you have a bee tied to your belt because there was an onion at the time.
What the fuck is this dude?
I didn't get that, but I loved it. I don't know why I loved that.
All right. I'll finish. I'll finish the story quickly. Right, but the point is basically, even 5%. I don't know how our economy is standing. Our like ruin of an economy is standing even 5% interest rates, and I just like shit is going to hit the fan, and everyone knows it, and everyone is laying off stuff, and we've got like a Wile E. Coyote moment going on now.
Yeah, it is.
But like it's become very, very unhealthy. And the point is that if you apply the orthodox Austrian system, like you would get, I don't want to go into the details of the mechanisms and like the banking system, but you get like 120% interest rates. If the Fed could no longer create money, it would be impossible to even measure. There would be cannibalism in the streets, dogs and cats living together, full Evil Dead, right? So the thing is that basically like that that is not a valid path because we're not cannibals here.
I don't know. Dave, I don't necessarily think that's right. I mean, there is some truth to the argument that essentially the Austrian insight, right, is that easy money is like heroin and market interest rates are like the like detox. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of detoxing from this unhealthy binge that you've been on. But to your point, there is probably a point where you're such a heroin addict that detox might
kill you.
Detox might kill you.
Like that. We are like 2 orders of magnitude past that line. Is my point.
I'll tell you, I'm not sure that that's right. But by the way, I think it's interesting you invoked there's a great book called I believe it's called The Forgotten Depression of 1921 by James Grant, which goes over 22 was the year after, but I think it was a steeper decline than the stock market crash of 1929. The government it was under Harding.
Grant's interest rate observer,
Yeah, and basically government did nothing because all of the mechanisms of government intervention had just been set up. They hadn't even figured out how to use them yet. You're thinking this is only a few years after the creation of the Federal Reserve and the income tax and all of this. This is pre-New Deal, so there's no and they just did nothing, and it just basically healed on its own. It was very painful for about a year.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You should read also Garrett Garrett's wonderful name, Garrett Garrett, the bubble that broke the world. You know, I think 1933. He was a great financial journalist, early libertarian. He also wrote.
That wasn't his real name, and we don't know why he changed his name to Garrett Garrett. No one knows.
I know.
He could have picked anything else as a last name other than Garrett when he just
I know.
There's an extra R.
It feels like some kind of like gay prep school joke, but you know,
let me just
like he lost like a drinking bet or something, right? You know, that's.
But I think there is a case for optimism with the current situation. And of course, by the way, just to make the kind of point, which is the Misesian point for anyone who's not like familiar, that then in the crash of 1929, the government acts immediately and does all of this effort to like reinflate the bubble. Hoover, you know, despite popular myths, was like a very interventionist president. Then FDR goes crazy, and it prolongs it to make it the worst depression in American history. Now, what I will say is that you're right that the fundamentals of the economy are so much more out of whack today than they ever were back then. I mean, the idea of like raising interest rates to what the market rates would be. I mean, no one knows exactly what they would be, but essentially,
you'd have like 100, you know. Like $1 trillion of liability tracing like $5 billion actual dollars.
Well, it's a price like any other price, right? So it's going to give you information. So the interest rate on money is the price of money, and it's going to the more the more savings that you have, the interest rates will probably go very low. And the less savings and the more spending you have, interest rates will go very high. And yes, we have no savings and the highest spending in the history of the world. So where the rates will be. Well, let me just finish this point here. I will say the one thing that is kind of that is the other side of this is that for us to stomach like hard times right now, to stomach going through the detox in order to like get healthy, not be a heroin addict anymore. We are, despite all of the crazy debt and all of this stuff, we are, I mean, so much richer than the people who went through the crash of 1921 or the people who went through the Great Depression in 1929. It's hard to put into words. And so much of this wealth that we have today is not just in the fact of it's in the knowledge that human beings have. Like, short of an atom bomb dropping on every major city in America, you're still going to have engineers that know everything they know about modern engineering. You're still going to have like modern medicine and the doctors knowing everything they know and the equipment and all of these things. I think it probably would break the modern system. It would probably break the dollar and break kind of like this awful system that we're living under. But I gotta say, my guess is that it's amazing if you look at like some of these countries, even, and this is decades ago, but if you look at some of the countries that really like radically adopted more free markets, compare, you know, you look at Hong Kong or like, you know, other examples, South Korea versus North Korea or something like that. It's amazing how quickly they rose to like skyscrapers from mud huts. It's pretty amazing. And I gotta say,
why they didn't do it in Haiti. But I
gotta say, we're not Haiti. We're the United States of America, and I still think actually that kind of like Misesian shock, Austrian economics response to this. I think there's a really good chance that we would get through it, and it wouldn't be cannibalism in the streets. And actually, what it would be us feeling the pain right now, suffering through a really tough couple of years, and then being more healthy and on a better path than we've been on in a long, long time.
Gentlemen, we're running out of time. I'm sorry I have to cut this short because this is really exciting.
I had a great response.
Curtis, what was your favorite part of what Dave had to say during this episode?
What was my favorite part? I think the parts where he agreed with me, the parts where he showed that he'd done deep reading, where he'd read Hoppe, where he knew about the panic of 1922 or 1921 as it actually was, and then read James Grant, and had wondered why Garrett Garrett is named Garrett Garrett. I think that, or had tried to go to the Property and Freedom Society but been foiled by his pregnant wife.
You are welcome.